Thank you for joining us on another episode of Popcorn for Breakfast. With me, as always, I hope, my co-host, Kirk. As promised, Kirk's going to do that for the entirety of this episode while I give my review. I am your other co-host, Cam, and we, as Kirk's sound effects, self-made sound effects, I should say, and green screen background suggest, are reviewing a film this week that is called White Noise, directed by Noah Baumbach, who is Academy Award winner, I believe, for screenplay for Marriage Story, and is a multi-time really great director. There you go. That's not based on any sort of anything other than my personal opinion. He has directed some good films, okay? So that's what we're going with.
Oh, I love it. Not to be confused with 2005's White Noise with Michael Keaton, the supernatural thriller where his wife has passed and he is seemingly communicating with her and other dead people through the white noise of technological devices. Have you seen that movie, Cam?
I have not seen that movie, but I am now annoyed by that movie because it popped up multiple times as I was trying to find images of this movie to use on the podcast. So
yeah, you have Michael. I've seen the movie. You have Michael Keaton just like touching the screen, almost Poltergeist style, and he's just like looking at it, and then like there's all these jump scares in it. Man, when I was, when you're younger. And you just think like when you see a movie, it's automatically good. Like that kind of blissful state of life.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a great state of life. That's a great
what
place
I kind
to
of
be.
thought, like with White Noise. And I watched it. I was like, that was so good. I loved it. Absolutely incredible. I can't believe I'm so lucky to see it. 5.5 rating on IMDb.com.
I mean, it could be worse. But Noah Baumbach, by the way, did not win an Academy Award for Marriage Story. He was nominated. What a loser. He's accomplished nothing. Wow.
Gosh.
What a hack.
Just has millions of dollars, but no awards.
It's my fault that I'm attributing fake awards to him. He has obviously been nominated for many awards over the course of his illustrious career and has written many good films, including some for Wes Anderson, but has also written Frances Ha, The Squid and the Whale, directed a bunch of films, including, I believe, both of those that I just mentioned. So,
yes. Yeah,
let's get into this movie, which is called White Noise. It is based on the I'm going to do the synopsis, so I'll just get into it right now. It's based on a 1980s novel by Don DeLillo that I have not read, so we'll be talking about that a little bit. It is a very interesting novel, as you probably could have guessed if you watched the movie. We will be talking about spoilers in this review, so make sure you have seen the movie if you are listening to this review. But basically takes place in the 80s. The gist of the movie, I will try my best to explain, as it is quite a wild ride, is that Adam Driver's character is a professor at a local university who teaches on Hitler, of all things. He is the foremost expert on Hitler, and his name is Jack. He's married to Babette, who is played by Greta Gerwig, and they have a family, a sort of blended family, based on a bunch of different kids from different marriages, and I think they have 4 or 5 kids total between them, and it's mostly a family comedy drama, for the better part of the film. It's kind of about really just life and them making it through life when what they call an airborne toxic event occurs. There is a train crash, a train derailment, when a train carrying toxic waste hits a very flammable truck in a very comedic fashion. There is a giant explosion and toxic waste is spewed into the air. So the city is kind of coming to grips with that and trying to understand. They're trying to follow the directions that they're being given, and you know, his character is exposed to the toxic waste, and they're trying to figure out. He's kind of half-heartedly trying to figure out if he is dying, and the whole thing just kind of revolves around that narrative. But it's a very thematic movie. It's a very interpretive movie where the narrative is sort of second fiddle to the larger theme-based things that are going on in the movie. And the narrative is so wacky and so just offbeat that it's hard to describe. It really is. It's kind of like nothing you've ever seen before. And I think that there is perhaps a reason that this film has not been adapted, or this book has not been adapted in the film until 40 years later. There's perhaps a reason for that.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's 40 years later. That's horrifying to think, as someone who was technically born in the 80s, as my wife likes to say. She wouldn't have married me if I was born in 1990. However, I'm only about 17 days into before 1989 ended. This movie was long hailed as an unfilmable movie adaptation, and here we are in 2020. Well, we're in 2022 making this film with Noah Baumbach. So, bravo! Lots to discuss.
Yes, lots to discuss. Definitely an all-star cast here with a lot of huge names, including writer-director Greta Gerwig, who is also Noah Baumbach's ex-wife. And what is their relationship status?
Oh, let me check Facebook here real quick.
Because I am confused, because I thought that Marriage Story was based on their separation and divorce. And yet people refer to them as being like together. So I'm confused as to what is going on with them.
Yeah, I was hoping that was about like a different relationship. First child in 2019.
Are they is that his spouse? Are they still married?
With Chris Cousin.
This is great. This is great radio here. Wasn't Marriage
having technical glitches. Hold on.
Wasn't Marriage Story based on their divorce or their, like, when they went through? I thought for sure it was.
December 1st, 2022, they're expecting their second baby, so it cannot be, unless it was about a potential separation.
Or was it about Noah Baumbach's separation from his first spouse? I don't know. I'm misinformed, clearly. So yeah, I guess they're a thing. So I did not know that. I mean, I had heard people talking about them being a couple. And so I was like, oh, they must be back together or what? I don't know. So
original muse for Marriage Story.
I'll send Kirk on the hunt. I'll send Kirk on the hunt while I talk about this. But let's get into the acting performances to begin with, as we always do, which we'll start with, and the Oscar goes to, who Kirk and I believe is the best actor in the film. It gives the best performance. Mine is going to someone who's really becoming a favorite of mine, and that is Mr. Adam Driver. This role is hilarious as Jack. He's asked to do some really funny things because this character is an absolute mess and a half, and yet is so similar to all of us in many ways, in that this character is afraid of everything that could possibly happen in the future, but is not at all afraid of what's happening in the moment. He is like hilariously aloof to what is going on around him, but is constantly panicking about what is to come. He fears death. He fears, embarrassment, ridicule at the hands of his peers and people who look at him, but always in the sort of future tense, which I find funny. As they're like dealing with this airborne toxic event, he really is just like, it's fine. It's whatever. But whenever he's potentially exposed to it, he's like, so how will I know if this thing is going to kill me? He's always worried about the future. It's a very funny character, but this character also acts as our conduit, our guide into this sort of surreal world. And I find that Adam Driver does such an excellent job of being our guide, kind of like the guy in Greek mythology. Man, I'm just on the ball today with my references. The guy who navigates the river Styx or whatever.
No.
Adam Driver is that guy, right?
I'll look that up too.
What an absolute mess. First podcast of the year. We're doing great. But he's great because he is sort of, in some ways, he's just as baffled by everything that's happening in his world as us. And so that's really fun. But he's also, a character in this world and is just as absurd as everything that's going on in this world at times. But I find that his reactions, we're oftentimes shown shots of his face as he is reacting to information that was just given to him. And it's what he does so well in this movie is to react in exactly the right way, to tell us how to feel, to tell the person who's watching how to feel, and to move the story and the themes in the direction that they need to go in order for the film to be effective. Adam Driver does a spectacular job. I think, when you look at this dialogue, it's Noah Baumbach has written a ton of films. They always have a bit of I shouldn't say always, but sometimes, especially when they're absurd or farcical in nature, or certainly comedic in nature, as his films kind of always are, the sort of rhythm and cadence of the dialogue is very unique, and the characters tend to speak in a way that you wouldn't really hear in the real world. So I thought that Adam Driver did a good job of navigating that, making it feel natural the way that he was speaking, even though it is altogether unnatural at times to what we would be used to hearing. So overall, I think just really great work. I think Adam Driver is one of these guys now that you can just count on to consistently turn in great performance after great performance, and to really give you your money's worth, or in this case, your hour's worth on Netflix, to whenever you sit down to watch one of his movies. So kudos to Adam Driver, my best actor for this film.
And now we interrupt our programming for a little bit of fact checking on Popcorn for Breakfast.
Do it. Fact check me.
So to go back most immediately to the River Styx, this is something that I did not know. And this is something after I knew that there was a ferryman, but I did not know his name. I have watched countless hours of Xena Warrior Princess and Hercules from Sam Raimi, and I'm terrified that I didn't know this. Pronunciation, Sharon?
Yes, yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Or in the Roman world, Cherus. So that's the name. You have to pay the ferryman in order to go to Hades.
Adam Driver is that guy.
Yes.
And White Noise is the River Styx. Gosh, help me. Send help.
I love it. And then the other one, backing up to what is the source material for A Marriage Story, directed by Noah Baumbach, whatever year that was. Didn't fact check that.
2019.
2019. Thank you very much. This was in relation to his two things: that he is a child of divorce, so there are memories from that.
Okay.
Which is, if you've seen The Squid and the Whale, heavily, the whole thing is about children of divorce, with him and Jeff Daniels and Jesse Eisenberg. And then if we go back to the source material, but some of the divorce from his parents, and then also his real life divorce from actress Jennifer Jason Leigh.
That's right. That's what it is.
And we have said her name. We've discussed her on this podcast. I know for a fact, because she is the lead in The Hateful Eight, which is Tarantino's probably least liked film, at least from my opinion, of all of his 9 films so far. So yeah, I think we're caught up to date. Is there anything else we want to expel?
No, I'm glad. I'm glad that you cleared that up, because I thought for sure somewhere in my brain it got twisted, and I knew that he was married to Jennifer Jason Leigh at some point. So this is all making a lot more sense. Thank goodness.
Yeah, for me too. My Oscar tonight will also go to Sir Adam Driver. Hopefully I don't repeat the exact same things as Cameron, as I was wildly typing on my computer keyboard a moment ago. But what I love, I'll just hit the highlights here, of Adam Driver was his accent was just incredible, and not necessarily a specific accent, but just his vocal work in this role of this naive yet brilliant man. And I want to say that some of the most brilliant people that I know, some of the most focused, intelligent people I know, have zero street smarts. Throughout this film, we see Adam Driver take all of this advice from his kids or stepkids, and it's hilarious. And it's also kind of just like very trusting of him, and also expresses the innocence that Adam Driver throws into this character from the script work. Is that his kids are saying, you can't do that. He's like, well, I can't do that. Okay, what can I do? And he's not just bulldozing his kids, as any one of us can be guilty of. I know I'm guilty of it, trying to have the right answer, and really just listening, just really listening. But when it comes to Hitler, you better watch out, because he knows everything about that evil man. The comedic timing Adam Driver exhibits throughout this piece of White Noise is absolutely incredible. Had me cackling in the middle of the night. I think I watched this at 11 o'clock at night, and I was just howling. And I love his withdrawal from conflict. Every time something rough comes up, until the pivotal moment where he finally has to confront Greta Gerwig, his Babette, his wife. When he confronts her, he's like, I've got the information. I know about the pills. I know that there's a motel. Tell me what's going on. And she is devious about this and that. And he's just like, no, you're not going to sidestep this. They're okay. And then he steps back. It's like, okay, you could ignore that fact, but tell me this fact. Tell me his name. Tell me where. Tell me this. Tell me that. So, but all up until then, we don't see this side of him. So that full arc, that full build, this boiling teapot that we're waiting to explode, finally happens in that scene. And that build, that arc to that moment is brilliant by Adam Driver. Just really fun and fascinating to watch. He pulls you through specifically just so wonderfully scene to scene, which I always marvel on with film actors, because these things are not shot chronologically, as a reminder to our listeners. So that means that when he was doing his script work, he was specifically saying, this is, part 1 of 7 scenes before we get to the big moment, but he might be filming scene 7 first, and scene 3, and then 2, and then 6, and then 1, depending on the set schedule. So always impressive. Adam Driver, he just continues to kill it. Never in a million years would I have imagined that we would have had this gift in an actor. Good job, Adam.
Yeah, he's great. He's like I said, I think he's really just turned into one of those guys. At least for me, I see him and I go, okay, this is going to be good. And that's part of the reason we talked about that movie that should be just as dumb as a box of rocks. That movie 65 that's coming out early this year should be awful, right? Like on paper. And yet you see him on the cast list and you see him out there doing his thing, and it's like, all right, 2 tickets for 65, please. Let's go check it out. So I think it's remarkable how quickly he's risen to that acclaim, and I think it's well deserved. I think he's really one of the best going right now. All right, scene stealer, the one who stole the scene. This one for me is easy, and it's a true scene stealer in every sense of the word, and it's someone who I don't give flowers to often on this program, and that's Mr. Don Cheadle, who is not a guy that you expect to pop up on a Noah Baumbach cast list necessarily. He's done, he was in Licorice Pizza, and he's done a lot of, not Licorice Pizza. I'm thinking of the other Paul Thomas Anderson, Boogie Nights is what I'm thinking of. He's been in indie films like this where he plays kind of like quirkier roles, and he always does a great job. But what I found so amazing about his performance in this movie is how seamlessly he took this dialogue and made it work. All of his line reads were so on point, and he was effortlessly hilarious, totally devoted to the character. I mean, he was just extremely detail oriented in his approach with this movie, and his character was awesome. Every time he was on the screen, you were laughing, you were having a good time. He was just totally capturing you with everything he was doing. And I was so knocked. I was absolutely knocked off my socks by that, and that's really all I have to say about it. I think the way that he fit within this world, it was like he was born in it. It was crazy. He just really, understood the vision, and that's sometimes, sometimes it seems like an actor just has like a light bulb moment with the movie, and they click with the director, and they're like, okay, I know exactly what you're going for, and they just deliver, and that's exactly what it seems like Don Cheadle did in this movie. He's a total scene stealer in every sense of the phrase.
Agreed. He is also my scene stealer, Don Cheadle. I feel like his role was underutilized. We lost track of him way too soon. He just kind of disappears after laying the foundation for the theme of things that we cannot control, which is a very great one and very well executed here. But the time that we do have, boy, oh boy, it is really, really fun. Definitely worthy of this role. His wacky works so much better, specifically Don Cheadle, than his hyper realistic roles. Every time I see him in a role where he's trying to play such a real person, it doesn't fit. But then you get this wacky local college professor, and this is exactly what I want. I think it must have been a switch for him when he did, correct me if I'm wrong, all the fact checking needed tonight, but maybe it was Funny or Die, where he played Captain Planet, but just like an absurd version of Captain Planet live action, which, please, if we could get a full feature film of that, I'm down for it, because he dives in with such just such brevity, such fearlessness to these wackier roles. Even the likes of Space Jam 2, I think I gave him an award then too, because I was just so excited for the shape that he took on. And I just can't imagine giving this specific award to anyone else tonight. Don Cheadle, scene stealer, bravo.
All right, we're 2 for 2. We'll see how we match up in the rest of the review. Those two really did stick out though, so I feel like it's one of those things where I would have been a little bit surprised if we didn't match up on those two, to be quite honest with you. Even though there are great performances, it's just that those two are so key and fit so well with the way that we've defined those categories that it makes sense. It just makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to the production. This is fun because this production and the production design is so 80s, but like surreal 80s, like 80s in a memory, like 80s in a nostalgic version of it. And so it's a really fun look into this world, and it's a really interesting world that they've built. But let's talk about the movie and how it's structured and built and all those things, and what worked and what didn't. Let's start with what worked, and that'll be our showstopper. For me, what really stole the show for me was this sort of kinetic energy that this film has, meaning that there's constantly motion, and there's constantly talking, and there's all of these things. And the reason that that's important in this movie is this idea of form follows function. So, I'm reading the book right now, so this is timely. I'm reading the book by Sidney Lumet, Academy Award-winning director, called Making Movies, and he talks about this, how whenever you're making a movie, the question you have to ask first is, what is the movie about? And that question determines how the movie will be told. So when I look at this movie and I interpret it, having not read the novel and not really knowing anything about it, so you have to take that with a grain of salt, is that it's kind of about the human condition, in the sense that it's about, like, we are... We fear death, and we're constantly getting all these inputs, but we're also looking for answers to help us not be afraid. But because we're doing that, we're creating more noise and we're creating more fear in doing that. It's like, think about how you have a headache in a weird spot on your head, and the natural response is to Google it and find an answer. Well, then you end up finding all these new things to be afraid of that weren't even on your radar before, and that's sort of what this is about. It's all the things that we as humans create in our lives, the fear and the role we play in our own insanity. And so when you think about white noise and you think about that, the idea that there needs to be constant talking and constant movement and motion in this film is critical to executing that theme through the actual production of the movie. And so I loved that. And I also think it just gives the movie a really great feel. It just keeps it, There's lots of insane things going on, and there's lots of hilarious things going on, but the whole time the movie feels live. It feels lively. It feels like it's moving, and I think that's important, because whenever a movie is a little bit avant-garde, or when the narrative is bizarre, sometimes there's a tendency to want to like disconnect a little bit, because you're like, okay, this is getting too weird for me. But because the energy's there, and because you can feel it and you can hear it, and it's so pleasing to kind of take in, it works. And so that idea, that kinetic energy, and the concept, the fact that it ties into the themes and the whole form follows function idea is it's just great filmmaking, and you love to see it. So I that's my showstopper here.
I don't think I've ever, I mean, probably yes, but one of the most, mark that down as one of the most eloquent responses you've ever said. I loved it. That's really just
Thank
beautiful.
you, sir.
Cam.
Thank you.
I loved it so much. Mine is going to be about movement and choreography throughout this film. I've got 2 subpoints for this. First, of course, we have maybe my favorite scene of the whole movie, and this is what sparked the showstopper. What got my attention, the biggest moment, is the impromptu lecture that we get with Adam Driver and Don Cheadle. No surprise that the Oscar and the Scene Stealer winners tonight get that as well, because you have Don Cheadle is trying to get just clout to be the Elvis expert on campus, and Adam Driver is the Hitler expert, and Don Cheadle thinks that if he can weasel his way in and get someone who is so intelligent and so acclaimed on campus as Adam Driver to come and speak at this impromptu lecture in this open lecture hall in a very Greek way. Speaking of Greek and the river Styx, that the students are sitting on steps so that way they can project and speak up. And it really is like a Greek play they put on. And Don Cheadle is speaking, and out of nowhere, Adam Driver swoops in and starts talking about Hitler juxtaposed against Elvis, and how they are both these incredible figures that everyone knows no matter what, and what makes them tick and what makes them people attracted to them, which then folds into the whole be wary of the person who stands up and gets a crowd to come, basically beware of false prophets, which then we see later at the quarantine campsite where the man with the television, entertainment and news and everything, knowledge and inputs, like Cam said, where that comes into play again. That whole choreographed scene right there, though, of entering and exiting for that lecture is absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I love the insanity of it, especially when at one point Adam Driver, in his weird robe that he likes to wear as his professor status, just like almost like attacks them, like if it was his Batman cape, he pops out and just like leaps at the camera. It's so fantastic. And then subpoint 2, the grocery store. We get the grocery store at the beginning, and we get a long scene there. Lots of conversations happen in there. He's talking with his daughters. He's taking on information. He is trying to solve problems. He's trying to learn from his family and trying to meet everyone's needs. And then at the end, the incredible dance number. Please stick around as the credits are rolling. It's wonderful. The mundaneness of it all, the going through the motions, and how something as simple as going to the grocery store can be so monumental. You might have incredible conversations in the weirdest places. Just all of those things wrapped into one, and how everything is just lined up and aesthetically, like the choreograph of putting things in and taking them out, that too just like shakes you to your core in inexplainable and unexplainable ways. So the choreography and movement of this film are very well executed.
I love it. And I love the grocery store as the kind of microcosm for the whole thematic base of this movie, because it's like in the grocery store, it's been well documented. The grocery store is meant to overwhelm you. It's actually designed to do that with the fluorescent lights and the no windows and the the tile floors and everything, the bright lights and the colors and all of that. And when you talk about a movie that's about white noise and about data intake and how there's too much going on and it's too loud around us, like that's the perfect little sub the little like one thing that encapsulates the whole theme. It's really really well done. Okay, let's talk about director's shoes and some of the things that we would do otherwise. I have to say, really for me, it comes down to the narrative, and this thing is broken into 3 acts. It's kind of cordoned off into 3 acts, which are named. You know, they actually give them names as they're going through it, and it's hard as you're watching it to understand how the acts of the film tie together. I think this movie does an excellent job, and Kirk and I have already given a couple of different examples of introducing a theme and following it through to fruition to make sure that it pays off. I think the themes are good and rich and there, but I think it at times does so at the expense of the narrative. I think there are a lot of times scenes, including that lecture scene, that makes a ton of sense on a thematic level, but makes a lot less sense on a narrative level. And so at times in this movie, if you're someone who's following the story closely, there would be plenty of places for you to go, okay, but why does this matter for the story that you're telling? And how does it get us here? And the answer in a lot of those cases is that it doesn't. I mean, it ties into the narrative in the sense that the narrative is meant to overall deliver the themes, but it has to make sense and be cohesive too. And I, again, have not read the novel, so maybe that's the reason people called this novel, whatever they called it, unfilmable or undoable or whatever, because maybe the narrative is so strange and just kind of like offbeat and broken up that it doesn't make much sense. But like a lot of what happens at the university, followed by the airborne toxic event, followed by the absolute, I don't even know what, of Act 3, which is just Act 3 is out there and then some. It's hard to find the line that ties all of that together. I think ultimately, the like I said, the themes are delivered well and it's entertaining throughout, but there are plenty of times where you're like, okay, what do I need to care about right now as far as the characters and what's going on and what they're doing? So I felt like that could have been tightened up or just lean away from it a little bit more. You know, there are plenty of movies that I'm thinking about. A movie I just watched recently, which was bananas to the max, which is that Bardo movie by Alejandro D. Inarritu. Narrative be damned. Let me throw some themes at you. And there are plenty of films like that for good reason. And I think that this movie struggled to find the balance between which direction it wanted to go. And so I think it delivered the themes really well, but delivered the narrative maybe not as well.
Beautiful. And sorry that I coughed right in the microphone just
did
before
you
entered.
I didn't even hear it.
Oh, good. You'll hear it on playback. It was I was trying to hit the mute button, and maybe I did. Maybe it got muted, but it was directly while you were talking. So we'll find out. This is all the fun things.
Yeah, exactly. We're just
episode.
Really going to work out the kinks here. Work out the kinks for the new year.
It's as if we've never done this before. Episode 2.
New year, new us. That doesn't necessarily mean better. It could mean worse. Who knows?
Who knows? My director's shoes. I gotta say, I cannot tell you the ending of this movie. I watched it. I remember the grocery store scene. I did not fall asleep, and I cannot tell you what happens after after they go to the motel and they shoot the guy and he gets shot, the toilet. Like I can't tell you what happens. And I don't know why. I have no idea why. So the story gets abandoned for themes. It's very similar to Cam, what you said. The story is so powerful at the beginning with sprinkled in themes. The story is the driver. They are the catalyst to give us therefore, which is great. And then once we get out of quarantine and there's a time jump, there things get real weird and it's hard to follow, honestly. So, and again, it could be from the source material of the novel, and that's why it could be confusing. But it did such a good job up to that point, is why it's so disappointing after that, where we kind of get back to it and then we step away from it, we step back into it, we step away from it. So the white noise of it all, we get trapped in and we don't get to see it, we live it. And that's not the best way to treat your audience. I will rewatch this again because I do want to figure out which way that Noah Baumbach was leading towards. But I feel like as an audience, we get lost in that abyss, and that doesn't feel comfortable. And if the goal of that is also still to make you feel uncomfortable, if you were so linear at the beginning of the movie and you have linear aspects in the second half of the movie, you have to have that through line still pull you through. Hope all that makes sense. The main plot against Babette fizzles out, even becomes insignificant after that. It's kind of upsetting because it was so good. It was just so strong and their relationship was just excellent. And then Babette, she kind of fizzles out after that as well. We don't really hear a lot from her. So that's my director's shoes. It's very similar. It's very similar, just stated slightly different, I think.
Well, it's like you have a 3-act structure, a typical 3-act structure for a film.
Yeah.
And they even go so far as to acknowledge the beginning and end, and therefore the ending of each one, and to name them. And yet each act feels like it wouldn't even recognize the act prior. You know, it's like it's such a departure in so many different ways from the story, with very few things pulling through. It's just it's interesting. It's interesting. So
yes.
Now I want to read the book because And if that's how the book is done, and Noah Baumbach made the choice to stay true to the book, you can't necessarily blame him for that. I think you do have to decide, why am I adapting this to film? I don't know. There's a question point there. There's a point there where it's like, do I stay true or do I make this thing gel more? Maybe there's a specific reason he didn't do that. Impossible to know without reading the book, but I totally agree with you there. But let's give final thoughts and scores and kind of wrap up White Noise, our first review of the year. By the way, this movie's available on Netflix for those of you wondering. Okay, my final thoughts. I think this movie is a really good time. It is very funny on very many different levels. There are lots of times where that comedy is extremely low comedy, as in there's panic at the quarantine site and everybody's driving away and running away and people are getting hit by cars left, right, and center, and a guy's riding by on a horse and they drive into a creek. It's all like very funny, almost like National Lampoon funny at times. It even sort of feels like some of those 80s comedies at a lot of different points there. And then there are points where it's high comedy and it's just like them delivering the funniest lines that like aren't funny to them in the moment, but are just hitting, like, just giving you an ultimate gut buster laugh. And it's like every line would hit somebody differently. So it's a really good time. I really enjoy. He blends a ton of different styles here. Sometimes it's, comedy. A lot of times it's farce. Sometimes it's tragedy. Sometimes it's drama. Sometimes it's horror, which I guess is a subsection of farce. I don't know. It depends on who you ask, but there are a lot of styles being mixed here, which is a bold choice, and I think one that pays off. It makes the movie feel live. It makes it feel exciting. It keeps you on your toes, I think, as a viewer, which is kind of where you want to be throughout this movie versus just kind of like sitting back and letting it happen. I think you kind of want to be like, ooh, what's going to be next? But the ensemble cast works. I think there's some clunkiness sometimes with the way that people are delivering dialogue, and that's just based on the writing choices and the way that you're writing dialogue in a very different way than how people actually speak. So sometimes that's going to happen. And I think some of that is intentional to a certain degree. And I think the narrative suffers. That's been documented in the review, but I think the themes are good and rich and well delivered, and they resonate with me personally, as someone who has many anxieties and is constantly worried about the future and is constantly taking in inputs and succumbing to the white noise around him. It certainly hits home. So I thought it was interesting how true this movie still is about life, maybe even more so now that in 2022, and there were even some pandemic-esque references in there as well that he snuck in. So that was all very interesting. But it's this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I think that's certainly true. And if you get through the first act and you're like, I hate this, then just leave. Because I'll be honest with you, it's not going to get better for you at that point. Like if you don't enjoy what's happening in Act 1, I can guarantee you're going to hate what happens after that. So just bail. That's just for free. But for me, it was a good time, and I had a lot of fun watching it. And it has its issues, but overall, I think it's a great movie. Solid filmmaking. You can understand why they're making the decisions they're making in most cases. So I'm giving it an 8.3 out of 10 kernels. Kirk,
beautiful.
You have the floor.
Hello, floor. It is I, Kirk. My score today, it's not going to be as high as Cam's, but it's not an abysmal score. I did love, like I just said, the beginning half of this movie, if not 75% of this movie. And then I felt like I was abandoned. I do not believe that there would be any reason to skip this movie. I think you should absolutely try it out. I think you should. It kind of has a Moulin Rouge effect. If you've ever seen Moulin Rouge, there is so much happening. It is sensory overload with how much information you take on in the first 10 minutes. And then there is a brief silence where I think the family is like walking across a parking lot or something. And then it's like, oh, I can breathe. No one's talking. No one's throwing anything. There's not something clanking in the background. And that's part of the dance to this. So when you watch Moulin Rouge, from Baz Luhrmann for the first time, there is so much information that you have to take in and process that I hated that movie the first time I watched it. But being trained in that way, I as soon as this started, I'm like, oh, strap in. We've got some stuff to learn. So be aware. Don't watch this when you're tired. Don't watch this when you've had a long or hard day. Watch this when you're ready to have some fun and you don't have any other stressors on your plate. You don't have to be the most alert you've ever been, but make sure you have a clear mind, and then you can really take this movie in for what it is and match them up, those themes and the narrative against your values and film preferences. So all that said, I loved this movie, but I didn't love this movie. I think it was a great film work. I think great, if not phenomenal, acting by some of our favorites, and some pretty impressive child actors in this place and space as well. I'm giving this movie today a 6.7 out of 10 kernels.
Nice. That's respectable. That's a respectable score. So I think it's safe to say we both liked it. Yes. just to varying degrees, and that's fun. I think there's a lot to chew on with this movie. We've touched on a lot of it. So if there are any themes or anything that you picked up on that Kirk and I didn't mention, we'd love to hear it. Love to hear your thoughts. I have many about this film, and part of that, part of what can build into a score is how much fun you have analyzing it too, which I am certainly fall victim to many times. But I think this is a great movie, and we both gave it a good, respectable score. So I like it. Check out White Noise. Tell us if you liked it. Tell us if you're one of the people who this is not for. I know you guys are out there. I can almost guarantee my wife is one of these people. She saw, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes of this and was like, what is happening? And I was like, fair. It's a fair question. What is happening? I was asking that question at times during this movie too. So just let us know what your thoughts are. But thank you so much for being here. We've got a new year kicked off on Popcorn for Breakfast. We've got tons of big things in store for you this year. But most of all, just thank you for being here, whether it be in podcast form, YouTube form, and a special thanks to our executive producer, Ryan Spriggs, as well as his band, Rhetoric. I don't know what we have in store for you next week, but I can assure you that we will be there in some capacity. So until next week.
Talk to you then.